Fasten your seatbelt. I am taking you for the ride of your life. I'm going to show you what this car can really do. Are you ready?
I am ready.
Hang on.
Okay.
Here we go.
Hold on to your butts.
Go get him, kid.
It might be a tumor.
It's not a tumor. Not a tumor at all.
As if you're going to ask me. So you can go ahead and ask me what you're going to ask me. And my natural response could be to get offended.
Hey, want to hear the most annoying sound in the world?
Yeah, well, you know, that's just like your opinion, man.
All right.
You're listening to the 30-something movie podcast. One movie each week, 30 years in the making. That's right, you're listening to the 30-something movie podcast. It's episode number 286, Wild at Heart. I mean, just real quick right off the bat, we're probably going to give away the tone of how we feel about this movie very early on when I say that it might have been better if this Wild at Heart podcast was a podcast related to the book that was written by a Christian author back in the late 90s regarding the crisis of a loss of masculinity in the modern church. That's not what this book or this movie is about, but we might have enjoyed that one more.
We might have lucked out.
Mm-hmm. If anybody's looking for that book, it's by John Eldridge. It was a pretty good book. I read it back in the day, but this podcast is not for that book. So, yeah, this is Wild at Heart, and we're going to get there in just a moment. Pat, how are you doing?
I'm okay, John. I'm okay.
You making it through? Okay.
I'm making it through okay. I've got my typical questions that I ask, you know, when this thing comes up.
Do you mind during this podcast, do you mind if I call you Peanut?
Oh, call me Peanut. Go right ahead.
Okay. All right. Well, Bo couldn't be with us tonight. I think this movie finished him off, so he wasn't able to be here with us to record. So I'm sure he's devastated. But you know, it's how it went this time. So, but yes, this is episode number 286, Wild at Heart. Very, very quickly, we spoil the movies we talk about. We spoil everything. So just be warned. This is the only kind of spoiler alert we're given for anything. We're just going to talk. iTunes reviews, please leave a 5-star review. Have it say,
accept.
Yeah, right. Have it say this. Listening to the 30-something movie podcast has been such a life-changing event. Not only are they, you know, they might be guys who ramble on about movies, but on the other hand, they have beautiful singing voices.
There we go.
There we go. You could, or whatever you want to write. We really don't care. Visit our website, 30podcast.com. So 30podcast.com. You can find us on all the social medias at 30podcast. So, Patrick, we're here to talk about Wild at Heart. Are you, well, I don't even know if I should start with this. Are you wild about this movie, Pat?
I was.
You are.
I was. I was just beyond excited. No, I'm really not. I don't even have the energy to come up with some quippy comment. I don't even have that. I'm sorry.
Well, this I think I will say that for all of us, and I do like to throw some of these in from time to time because I know we kind of let our audience vote on some movies a little bit, and then you know, we obviously kind of vote on which ones we want to do and stuff like that. Every once in a while, and I'll tell more about this here in just a minute. My wife asked me this the other day. She said, "So how did this one get through?" And I said, "Well, you know, sometimes I like to just throw stuff in that I've never even heard of before. If it looks, if it's got actors that I'm like, oh, well, that's a great combination of actors. Even if I've never heard of it, you know, never seen it before, never heard of it, I might just pepper in a few of those here and there each year, just so there's a surprise here and there, you know, because we could go through all these years and say, oh, we're only going to do movies that we absolutely loved. Well, then, you know, what's the use of having a podcast where you just, I mean, I guess that could be fun too, but, you know, I like to be surprised every now and then.
Of course.
So this one was, I guess, a bit of a surprise.
So how did you get to this one? I mean, was it this cast members that you just wanted to see?
It was the cast. I knew that when I saw that it was Nicolas Cage, Willem Dafoe, Laura Dern, Harry Dean Stanton. I mean, Isabella Rossellini. I mean, all these different people. I'm like, wow, that's a pretty big cast. And then I read the description, the quick little description of what the movie was about, and I thought, you know what, this movie sounds a lot like a like a Kill Bill or something like that, where you've got a whole bunch of celebrities, like you've got big name people in these different roles, and they might be kind of quirky. And so I thought, let's just throw it in there. But I think also this one, and I know, Pat, sometimes you have a lot of fun with these movies. This one was one of those that I think showed up. I looked at a couple of different websites that said, like, here are the top 50 or top 25 underrated movies of 1990, or here are the top movies that you just absolutely must see before you die. And there's a ton of those articles out there on the internet, but I try to go to ones that are maybe a little bit more either reputable or have a little bit more gravitas behind them. And I think that this was one of those, it was on a website of, hey, if you're looking at movies in 1990 or the early 90s, this is one that maybe not a lot of people have seen, but you should check it out. So I was like, well, all right, between the combination of actors that are in this movie and, that at least reading the storyline, I was like, oh, well, that could be kind of fun. And then finding this in a couple of different places, I was like, well, yeah, why not? Let's just throw it in there.
Right.
So that's why we threw it in there. I will say, before we jump into, because I don't think I have a whole lot of movie news stuff, and we're recording some of these a little bit further ahead of time, so any news we bring up now, you're going to hear it like 3 weeks from now. I don't think I have any movie news, so I will say this real quick just before we jump on into the background info on the movie. I actually went back because this is a David Lynch movie, and the only other David Lynch movie we've done on the podcast was Blue Velvet.
Okay, this was the same guy?
Same director.
Okay.
Does that answer a lot of questions for you?
It really does.
Okay. Because, and here's what's funny, I actually went back. I didn't listen to the whole thing, but I went back and I listened to our Blue Velvet episode just to see what did we say about that one. And I will be curious to see if we say the exact same things about that one that we're going to say about this one.
I wouldn't be surprised.
So we'll find out. But if anybody else is interested in listening back to that episode, that was a whopping 3.5 years ago. It was episode number 103. The title of that episode is Lend Me Your Ears, and it came out actually on my birthday in 2016. It came out December 6, 2016. So it's our episode number 103 if you want to go back and listen to the Blue Velvet episode. And I think we kind of came to the conclusion that we're not saying that David Lynch is a bad director. We're just saying maybe David Lynch isn't our cup of tea.
Right.
So, and that may have held true in this one too.
Just maybe.
Yeah.
There's a strong possibility.
Yeah. Now I know my dad. I've never actually watched it. My dad really liked the TV series Twin Peaks. Have you ever watched Twin Peaks?
No, I have not.
Okay, because I remember my dad really liked that and would watch that a lot. Have you ever seen? And I have not. And I know we've probably got a few listeners that are going to start screaming at their speakers as soon as I say this. I've never actually seen the movie Dune before. Have you ever seen that? I have seen Dune. You have seen Dune. Do you like Dune? I like Dune. In fact, I'm excited for the remake of Dune. I know. That's coming out. I want to see the original because I've still never seen the original. I want to see that before. And I've never read the book before either, but it's well, and that was the other thing. My brother is talking. We're thinking about reading through the book again in anticipation of the new thing coming out. But anyways, yeah, continue. Yeah. Dune is pretty cool. But anyway, he's also the director of Dune. So I don't know. I just, it seems like there's a combination of stuff that maybe when he's allowed to just unleash and go with his own personal style, it's just not one that we necessarily enjoy. Yeah, that's my take on it. Yeah, I guess I'm just curious now. It's kind of like I'm just curious as to, what are we trying to tell? And I would like someone, don't have to look very far to find, but I mean, I would like someone to tell me, everything that I'm missing. Like why is this awesome? Explain it to me. Explain it to me. I'm laughing, Pat, because that's almost word for word what you said 3.5 years ago. Are you serious? I'm serious. I think part of your exact words were, how when you play a role-playing game and they have all of the supplemental books that explain to you everything that was in the first role-playing book? I need the supplemental books. That was what you said when we were talking about Blue Velvet. You said, I just need somebody, I don't know what I watched, and I need someone to sit down and explain to me what I watched and what I was supposed to get out of it. Oh my gosh, that's funny. That's almost exactly what you said. Well, to quote James Kirk in Wrath of Khan, well, he's consistent. I'll give this to him. Yeah, there you go. I'll give him that. All right. Well, let's jump on into the background info on this one. Then we'll get going and
do it.
Maybe
do it.
Maybe as we talk through it, we'll change our minds.
Maybe this is a masterpiece.
Maybe. Well, let's find out. All right. Well, this one's called Wild at Heart. Came out on the 17th of August, 1990, rated R, with a runtime of 2 hours and 5 minutes. Directed by.
It's a soft R. I can't. I don't. I could see this definitely being a PG-13. Possibly.
This is the Pat Canigallo sarcasm hour, ladies and gentlemen.
I would say, and this does not bode well. Okay, listening audience, I'm sorry, because when I start interrupting the monologue, it's never a good sign. Here's me cranking my boom mic away. Okay, and I'm muting. So my boom microphone is away from my mouth. I'm muting. I'll quiet down. I'm sorry, John.
No, you're good. You're good.
Sorry.
You're good.
I'm sorry too.
No, you're fine.
We're all sorry.
We're all sorry here. How are you? Directed by David Lynch, who did Dune, Blue Velvet, and Twin Peaks. Produced by Steve Golan, who died in 2019. Monty Montgomery and Sigurjón Sigvatsson. I apologize to everyone in the Scandinavian countries because I just butchered that horribly.
That was a mouthful.
Golan did Spotlight and Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. Montgomery did The Portrait of a Lady, and Sigvatsson did Killer Elite and Wind River. Writers for this one were Barry Gifford, did the novel, and David Lynch, who did the screenplay. Gifford also did Lost Highway and Hotel Room. Lynch did Dune, Blue Velvet, and Twin Peaks. Cinematography by Frederick Elms. He did The Dead Don't Die, Blue Velvet, and River's Edge. Music by Angelo Badalamenti. He did Blue Velvet, Nightmare on Elm Street 3, Dream Warriors, and Christmas Vacation. Budget on this one was $10 million. Box office was $14.6 million in North America. The reviews, the Rotten Tomatoes critics give it a 65%. Rotten Tomatoes audience gives it an 81%. So the audience way higher than the critics on this one. IMDb gives it a 72. Letterboxd gives it a 74. CinemaScore did not have one for this one. Probably didn't open in enough theaters for it to be a CinemaScore deal. Starring Nicolas Cage.
It was hard for the people to be understood when they were like being interviewed with bags on their heads. So
that may also be true.
Yeah,
that may also be true. Oh, speaking of, so we'll get to the actors and everything here in just a second. But that was the other thing, that there was a story that I had read back when we did Blue Velvet, and I was just listening to the episode. So maybe the reason why the audience score is so high and the critics score is so low is that if you're going to see this, you know that you're going to like the David Lynch movie. I don't think you'd go see it if you didn't already have watched his movies and enjoyed them and whatever. I told a story in the first one that I had found as I was looking up stuff for Blue Velvet back a couple of years ago. And the story was that in one of the early showings of that movie, somebody had a heart attack. He was rushed to the emergency room. And as soon as he was stabilized, he got up, left the emergency room, and wanted to get back to the theater so he could finish the movie. So apparently, if you really like David Lynch's movies, you'll just get that heart attack over with quickly and get back to the theater.
Yeah, I guess it's
so.
There it is, man.
There it is. All right. Well, starring Nicolas Cage as Sailor Ripley. He was in The Rock and Face Off. Both movies so much more fun than this one. Laura Dern played Lula. She was in Jurassic Park and Marriage Story. Willem Dafoe played Bobby Peru. He was in Spider-Man and The Last Temptation of Christ. Crispin Glover played Dell. He was in Back to the Future and River's Edge. Diane Ladd played Marietta Fortune. She was in Christmas Vacation and Chinatown. Isabella Rossellini played Perdita. She was in Death Becomes Her and Blue Velvet. Harry Dean Stanton, who died in 2017, played Johnny Farragut. He was in Repo Man and Alien. J.E. Freeman, who died in 2014, played Santos. He was in Miller's Crossing and Patriot Games. And Calvin Lockhart, who died in 2007, played Reggie. He was in Predator 2 and Coming to America. Here is the trailer, and we'll be back in just a second.
Can I talk to Lula?
You are not gonna see him ever.
I'd go the far end of the world for you, baby.
A man can't ask for more than that.
You move me, Sale. You really do.
You want me to shoot Sailor in the brains with a gun?
Uh-oh. didn't have much parental guidance.
Baby, you better run me back to the hotel. You got me hotter than Georgia asphalt.
This whole world's wild at heart and weird on top.
All right, here we go. Let's just buckle down and let's just get through this.
All right.
Like a kid sitting down to dinner when you know there's a giant heaping plate of broccoli in front of you. Let's just get through this.
I like broccoli, John.
I do too. See, I like broccoli, so that probably wasn't a very good analogy.
This wasn't broccoli.
Liverwurst. Do you like liver?
About as much as I like tongue.
Yeah, okay. I've heard that about you. So the questions that we typically ask are from the book Focus, The Art and Soul of Cinema by Tony Watkins. Our first question is, and I'm going to probably figure I already know the answer, but the whole point of the podcast is for you to tell me the answer. Pat, how does this movie make you feel? Let's just go. In fact, let's not even go like opinion of the movie. As you watch this movie, what emotions did you feel? You're just like visceral reaction to this movie.
But what's the emotion for like just feeling dirty? I mean, it just felt, and not like, oh, it was gritty. It was it was just it was just unsettling.
Mm-hmm.
And not in a, oh man, wow, that's a really poignant lesson that I should learn because boy, that's unsettling. Like, no, it was
you felt grimy.
Grimy. That's a great one. That's how I felt watching this. It was just kind of, of a feel to it.
Yeah.
So what about yourself?
So feeling wise, I will say I just didn't care. I kind of knew, knowing who the director was, knowing what I was getting myself into watching this, and knowing that we didn't really care for Blue Velvet. I kind of went into this one. I was like, okay, my expectations are, I'm going to hold my nose and I'm just going to step right in and we'll see how it goes. And it just was, yeah. It was, well, here, so I'll tell you how this goes. We were, when we were going to watch this movie, it was this last weekend, and we were going to watch this movie because I knew, we were originally going to do our recording of Ghost and this movie on the same night. We had to kind of rearrange some things, but originally we were going to do two movies for this recording, and I hadn't watched either one of them yet and was running out of time. And I was like, you know what? I've seen Ghost before, so if I don't finish that one this time, totally fine, because I've seen it several times. I'll be good if I don't get to that one. I got to watch Wild at Heart though.
Right. Sure.
So I think it had been a little bit of a busy day, and it was, we got the kids in bed and sat down at night, and I had asked my wife before. I said, I've got a couple of movies to watch. We've seen Ghost, and I know you really like that one, but I got to try to watch this one first. It's supposed to be a love story. To which she asked, wait a minute, is this like how your dad always used to tell us that everything was a love story? Turns out, yes. So we start to put this movie on, and I'm not even sure we got more than 2 minutes into the movie.
Yeah, I'm out.
It was the opening scene where he starts to just bash the guy's head into the floor.
Oh, I know.
And there's just blood everywhere. And that's as far as we got. As soon as it hit that scene, I was like, you know what? Life's too short. She's like, well, but you have to watch this one. I was like, no. She's like, okay, I'm not going to argue with you this time. So, no, we switched it off and we put on Ghost, and we had a much more enjoyable evening. Singing with the Righteous Brothers and all that stuff. But that was kind of my initial reaction to this movie. Was I put it on, and we've watched, my wife and I have watched movies before that they can be kind of intense.
Sure.
So it's not like we always have to shy away from that. But it was our first reaction was, ugh. No, no, not tonight.
Yeah.
It's kind of like one of my favorite gifts that I like to use sometimes when somebody asks me to choose something I really don't want to choose, or ask me to do something I really don't want to do. I always do the animated gif of oh god, I'm gonna blank out on what her name was from The Matrix when she goes, "Not like this, not like this." Yeah.
Yep.
So that's kind of how it was. It was like, okay, we got to watch a movie for the podcast. Not like this.
Yeah.
So that's, I mean, it's kind of the same. How does it make you feel? If I want to talk about the movie as a whole, when I did finally watch through the whole thing, is just I don't care. I don't care about any of these characters.
Right.
So, and we'll get more into that here in just a minute. But that was just kind of the initial reaction was, no, thank you.
Yeah.
And I get it. I mean, like I said, I've seen movies like this before, where it's a very, it's a filmmaker. It's not just a director. It's a filmmaker. He's making a film that has, his own particular style, and it's not the same style as going to see, Winter Soldier or, Man of Steel or Star Trek or something like that. It's definitely a style that is meant to make you think more than you would normally think through an action movie or think through a romantic comedy or something like that. And that's fine. But I think I've just decided that his style is not my style. It's just not one. There's plenty of other movies that make me think that I enjoy a whole lot more, even ones that make me feel kind of like, ugh, yikes, that was intense. I just don't like his style. It's not for me. I'm not saying it's bad. It's just not for me.
Right. Well, ditto on this end. And again, I want to reiterate what I'd said earlier. Can someone just explain it to me? Like, tell me why I should care about these characters and what they're doing to make them sympathetic characters. And like, kind of like you're just like disinterested or detached or however you describe that. I'm kind of asking the same thing. Like, why should I care about this? I mean, yeah.
So real quick, before we get too much further into it, the basic gist of the movie is you have Nicolas Cage and Laura Dern are our two main characters, and it's Nicolas Cage is Sailor, Laura Dern is Lula, and the basic gist of the movie is that you kind of find out through the course of the movie that he was kind of running with a bad crowd, and somehow you find out a little bit later that he had some kind of dealings with Lula's father, and was present the night that her father was killed. But then what you find out is that through the course of the movie, the mother does not like him at all. And the mother, you kind of find out through the course of the movie that the mother is probably responsible for the father's death, that she is the one that had him burned alive.
Okay.
And the movie starts off where Sailor and Lula are on a date. They're out somewhere, and someone steps up and actually tries to stab him. And as you kind of find out throughout the course of the movie, that the mother has tried to arrange this because she doesn't like him and she doesn't want him to have anything to do with her daughter. And the rest of the movie, I mean, he ends up beating the guy, smashing his face into a wall, smashing his face into the ground, and kills him, and ends up going to prison for it. Movie jumps forward a few years, and he gets out of prison, and Lula comes to pick him up, and they decide, look, we're going to break parole. We're just going to leave. We're going to drive to California. So we're just going to get out of here. We're getting off on our own. We don't care. We'll just be on the run. We love each other. That's all that matters. And the mother decides to then send both a private detective and a series of, different bounty hunters, for lack of a better term, I guess, to go track them down and either kill Sailor or put him back in jail, because she just wants her daughter to not have anything to do with him.
Right.
So we have this kind of weird menagerie of characters that show up throughout the course of this, and as it goes further on, we find out that Lula is pregnant as it gets a little bit closer to the end of the movie, and it's just kind of it's very similar in a lot of ways to Blue Velvet. When we talked about Blue Velvet a few years ago, we said that one of the images that David Lynch used regularly was the image of insects. He kept showing kind of bugs just below the surface of everything, and that's kind of the way this one is too. Is that everything? They're passing through a bunch of small towns on their way through the countryside to get to California from where they were. And as they do that, it's just kind of I read in an article somewhere that was talking about David Lynch's style. And his style a lot of times is to take the everyday average small town America and either outright tell you or show you in some way that there is just rot beneath the surface. that the surface of everything is not as pristine as it might look. It's not as, the small town Americana kind of feel. Yeah, it's all great, but there's horrible stuff beneath the surface of that. And that's kind of what you get as you go through these small towns that they're passing through, and everything that happens to them is it's meant to be like a road trip movie. It's meant to be kind of a Bonnie and Clyde type of thing. It's meant to be a Romeo and Juliet type of thing. But there's a lot of death, and there's a lot of gore, and there's a lot of just junk underneath the surface of everything. And that's kind of David Lynch's MO for his movies. Is it's what I read in the article, and I like the way they put it, and I wrote it down, and I can't find the piece of paper where I wrote it down. It's kind of like it's small town America, but a nightmarish version of small town America.
Yeah.
Through a lot of his story. So that's the basic gist of the movie. We can get to the very last scenes of the movie here in a little bit, because I definitely have some comments about that and how that all played out. But so let me ask you a tougher question, because I will get back to one of our questions is what doesn't work for this movie. And I think we've already said a few things, but so let me ask you this one, and I'm going to ask you to try to come up with an answer. What in this movie does work for you? Is there anything in this movie that you did enjoy? Can you look at it and go, hey, you know what? The rest of it, totally horrible. This piece of it was fine. And I will tell you that as listening to our Blue Velvet one, we both agreed that the music was a bright spot. So if you're an Elvis fan, you'll enjoy the music in this one.
Yeah.
What works for you, Pat? Is there anything in this movie that works for you? And I would challenge you to come up with at least one thing.
Come up at least with one thing that worked for me.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll say Nicolas Cage.
Okay.
Nicolas Cage, I mean, it's kind of like, how every actor kind of has their thing that they can fall back on. Tom Cruise has his thing. Harrison Ford has his thing. You go through the list and there's like, okay, if it's almost like a no-brainer. You hire that actor or actress, and sure, they're going to reach a little bit and they have different roles, but then there's like a certain iconic, like they can pull this guy off really, really well. Now, obviously there's character actors that do that, but I'm saying like the big mega stars, they all have their type that they play very well, where it doesn't seem like acting. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And it's like watching Nicolas Cage in this one, it was kind of like watching him develop that a little bit. Now, and by develop, I mean maybe like him working it out a little bit, but moreover, just him establishing that, like, okay, if you're wanting to know who is Nic Cage as an actor, what are his characters? What does he imbue in his characters? Like, you're kind of seeing that develop. You know what I'm saying? I mean, there's, and even it can be diverse movies, but I know we're doing Ghost in a little bit, or have we already done Ghost?
Ghost will have been last week.
Okay, so
in the time travel that we did.
In the time travel that we did, Patrick Swayze. Okay, he is a very different character in this, and as compared to Roadhouse, as compared to Dirty Dancing. But there's certain elements that he brings to each character that are the same.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? Like, that's what I mean. Harrison Ford, Harrison Ford can, he's definitely, does great at the action roles, but his bread and butter is a character that might be slightly out of their depth, maybe just a little bit, has to stretch a little bit. Whether that's like Indiana Jones, who, is just barely one step ahead of the bad guys, sometimes not. Or whether that's like when he's playing Jack Ryan in the Tom Clancy things, and that Achilles heel is that, or not Achilles heel, but that thing that he's trying to overcome is protection of his family, or to do the right thing when everyone else is not. Like, I'm kind of rambling, but you get what I'm saying? Like, every actor or actress has a, put them in this role. It can be a bad movie, but my gosh, it's fun watching them do their thing. And I think that's, I hope I'm explaining that the right way, but that's what watching this movie does, is it shows, for me, it's like, oh man, that's Nicolas Cage, like developing the Nicolas Cage thing, where it sounds like he's speaking like Elvis, and he's, a little crazy, and, he can get that disheveled hair thing going. And, so it's just interesting seeing that. I guess that's what I'd say. I'd say it's fun. Well, my gosh, there's innuendo in this line, but it was fun seeing Laura Dern.
Yes.
I mean, how, now, but the thing that I get with it is it's like, okay, we saw a whole lot of Laura Dern, and I don't think of myself as a prude, but it's like, it feels like late night Cinemax movies. It was kind of like, why is that all in there? Like, what are we establishing with that? Other than it just being there.
Well, it was definitely a progression of her part from Blue Velvet, because in Blue Velvet, remember, she was very much the very innocent, did not understand the way things work in the real, I'm using quote fingers here, in the real world. And you remember that there was in Blue Velvet, she ended up thinking that her boyfriend was cheating on her with someone else. And then that woman shows up naked on her front lawn. I don't know if you remember that part of the movie or not, but so that very clearly we've progressed from there in this movie. And I think the idea was, her character's personality is still almost childlike innocence.
Almost, but my gosh, what happened to her when she was a child?
Well, I know. And it's almost, it's like this childlike innocence, but also mixed with very much not a whole lot of innocence there at all. But on the surface, kind of her demeanor and how she presents herself is very much like very naive, is kind of how she presents herself, when really, I'm not sure how naive she really is, but, and that may play into what we've already said about David Lynch, is that you've got something that on the surface, it looks like the way you would expect it to look, but then under the surface, there's a sea of rot going on under the surface.
Okay. Yeah. And again, I get that. And okay, maybe that's that deep meaning that I'm supposed to understand, but it's sort of like, I'm not very compelled by the story. I'm not looking into, like, wow, these characters, this is really insightful. I'm not walking around any more or less than I would have been if I had not seen this movie, like looking around saying, oh man, society is really falling apart. It was like, it was a show that it was a movie that was just telling a really warped and twisted story. And I'm not sure what my takeaway is going to be, that's again, and I might be saying word for word what I said when I was reviewing the other picture, but it's like, okay, I understand that we're trying to show rot in society, but give us something that has maybe a little bit less zany and a little bit more realistic characters. This was almost cartoonish.
Right. Well, and ultimately that's why I think David Lynch is not for us, because that is his style. Right. His style is, he's going to comment on society, and he's going to comment on all of those different things, and he's going to do it in a very surrealist way. So I don't, with him, and admittedly, I have not watched a ton of his movies, but with him, I think that's what you're going to get. Is I think you're not going to shy away from the zany, because I think that's part of his message is, I want to show you all of this stuff, and I want to show you using a surreal lens, using ridiculousness, using eccentricities and things like that. But yeah, so I think if you go into a David Lynch movie, you have to expect that going into it. And I think that's what we said about Blue Velvet too, was it's like, well, we hadn't seen this before, hadn't really had a whole lot of exposure to his movies, and okay, I'm sure somebody likes this, and I don't want to belittle its quality, but at the same time, I just don't like it. It's not for me.
Right.
So for you, what works is getting to see kind of the early stages of the Nicolas Cage persona. Okay. Which I did read something that I thought was kind of interesting. Nicolas Cage said that this movie was kind of one of the first times that he felt like he really started to move from method acting to character acting. And so for anybody who's not sure about the difference between method acting and character acting, method acting it's very much based on reality and trying to get into the mind and the emotions of the character. Character acting is a little bit more like it's almost a cartoonish is not the right word, but it's the word I'm going to use because that's the word we've used a couple times now, just in the last minute. Character acting is more eccentricities about the character. It's not so much getting to, well, what would a person like this really feel? What would a person like this, if I was in this situation, what would I really feel? And character acting is a little bit more, well, I'm just going to come up with some crazy stuff. This guy's going to wear a snakeskin jacket. He's going to talk like Elvis. It's going to be kind of weird and eccentric. And so he said this was one of the first movies where he really felt like a director was pushing him to get outside of the idea of method acting. So that's probably where it probably is why part of this is where we start to see that Nicolas Cage. I think you saw it a little bit in Raising Arizona, but that was a comedy movie where that's definitely what you would expect. And then you go to this one, because he wasn't like this in, it was a little bit different in the Moonstruck movie. That was one of the other ones that we had done for the podcast a few years ago that he was in, but he a little bit more of a serious role. And this is one is where you start to get into that like quirky, zany, like there must have been something he really liked about this movie, because I feel like you're right. I think this is where we start to see the beginnings of when people look at a movie and they go, oh, that's a Nicolas Cage movie. I think this is maybe the beginnings of that, like you said.
Right.
So I was trying to think too, what works for me in this movie. And I think what works for me is the characters of Sailor and Lula. I think that their interactions with each other, when they're having their conversations, I think that piece works for me, but only because it reminded me of, there was an author that I used to read that he's a short story author. He's got a couple novels too. And I'm not sure that he's alive anymore. I think he died in the 90s. But his name is Larry Brown. And a lot of his books are just very, it's got a very Southern flavor to it. So you could just almost picture everybody speaking in a Southern drawl when you read these books. But it's, a lot of times it's half of his short stories, I feel like, are short stories about a couple of people sitting around drinking a couple of beers on their porch and having a conversation. And it's just very much small town, Southern life, day-to-day kind of stuff. And it's very much based on relationships. Not a lot of action in the stories necessarily, but it's all about relationships and things like that. And so I feel like that's what I liked about this movie was the relationship between the two of them.
Okay.
Now how that all continued to play out through the course of the movie, not so much. And not where, this is kind of bleeding into the what doesn't work for me is, while I liked their interactions with each other, I just didn't care about them overall.
Right. I did not care about the characters.
Yeah. I like them as characters, but when it came down to it, if I'm trying to think of a way to say this without sounding horrible, if something horrible happened to them, I wasn't affected by it. And I think that that's something for somebody like David Lynch, who I feel like a lot of what he does is an attempt to shock us. Maybe he feels like everybody in America is just complacent, so I need to shock them into seeing, oh, here's how life is. You're just letting things, you're not recognizing the defects that are in the world around you. So I'm going to shock you into seeing what's wrong with the world around you, so maybe you could wake up and do something about it. That's all well and good, but I also feel like the shocking moments in this movie were just that. They were shocking moments, but it didn't cause me to feel anything for these characters long term. It didn't cause me. I didn't come away with this thinking, oh, I really hope, when he got rearrested at the end of the movie and he was back in jail again, I was like, oh, well, that kind of figures.
Yeah.
And I didn't really care. Like, I just didn't feel, I feel like normally in a movie like this, if I knew that the two love interests had gone on this road trip and that was their plan for their future, and all of a sudden it was cut short and now they have a kid and he hasn't seen his kid in almost 6 years. And I feel like in the back of my mind, or even in the front of my mind, I'd be sitting there going, that's horrible. How would I feel if I, somehow had to be separated from my kid for 6 years? And in this movie, I kind of sat there and I was like, all right.
Yeah, whatever. And it's like, I'm okay with the shock value, but what are you shocking me into? Like what I'm shocked into, I don't care. Like, I don't, like, I'm not going to go out and volunteer at a soup kitchen or start speaking out against opioid. The shock value, and I'm going to borrow a phrase, and it might be appropriate or it might not, but from the Friendly Fire podcast, those guys will talk about sometimes the gratuitous violence in movies.
Yeah.
And they will sometimes describe it as they'll describe it as pornographic.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of like, man, that's an interesting use of that word. I wonder how that applies. And it's like, okay, I get how they're using it. And it's like, I think I want to use that here. The shock value is here just to, I mean, I don't get the deeper, I'm not seeing it. Like, I'm not seeing the connection between that and like what am I supposed to be empowered to go see after seeing something like this? You know, like what are my eyes being open to? Oh man, you just don't see the truth. Okay, well, what's the truth? Like, what am I supposed to go out and feel after seeing this movie? And I think that's where I'm left with, okay, well, they're shocking us just with the sole purpose of shocking us. Mm-hmm. I mean, in that sense, I mean, and obviously some of the adult scenes could be considered this, in, you know, like with the number one definition of the term, but it's like, it's pornographic. It's supposed to, you know, catch our attention and excite us. Mm-hmm. And it's like, well, I mean, that stuff I don't find very exciting. Drugstore Cowboy, that movie, I was really taken with that movie. Like, wow. I mean, and there were a lot of difficult scenes in that movie, but at least that left me with something. That movie, I had a completely different reaction to. That movie left me with a, man, I do need to retool. I do need to, you know, it's kind of, you know, shift the lens a little bit, shift the focus on how I view, you know, the drug problem and the drug culture in the United States. I'm going to say another movie, and boy, I haven't seen it in a long time, and maybe I'm way off with this, but Leaving Las Vegas, that didn't really paint a happy tale. But you're kind of left with, wow, this is, you know, look at what happens with, you know, these people that are just kind of like, and they're not living a very positive life. And but I cared about them. That's the thing too. Like, I mean, I wouldn't want to aspire to be them, but I cared about those characters. I don't care about these characters. Like, I don't care about the message. I can't see the message. I mean, you know, it's like in the original Star Wars, find the controls that extend the bridge. I think I just shot him. It's not connecting for me how the imagery we're seeing, the shock value we're seeing, what is that shocking us into? Like, I don't feel enlightened after seeing it. I don't see the dawning of, oh my gosh, that's what's going on that I missed in society. It just seems to be shock value for shock value's sake.
Well, and I wonder if, and again, fully admitting that I have not seen a lot of David Lynch's movies, but I wonder if part of it too is this early enough on for him that he's not quite there yet. Like, he's trying to figure out how to shock us into caring about something. And just for me, maybe there are other people that just have an emotional reaction to this movie. They love it with every fiber of their being, and it reaches them on levels heretofore unknown, you know, to humankind. But I don't know. It doesn't seem like it's you're right. It's not making that connection. It's not connecting the, I want to shock you into caring. I want to shock you into doing something. It's a call to action. It's a, you know, I'm trying to shock you into empathizing with these characters, but there's a disconnect. It just doesn't get there. It's just the shock. And we haven't followed through with the rest of the, now I've shocked you, care about these people and care about what happens to them, because I just don't. They come across as caricatures. And so I can have a little bit of fun watching them, but then when it's all said and done, I mean, it almost feels like in some ways you've sat through a 2-hour cartoon where people are getting anvils dropped on their head.
Right.
You know, so it's like Wile E. Coyote and the Roadrunner for 2 hours and 5 minutes. And, you know, it not even quite as funny as that.
No, exactly.
So there was a lot that I kind of hoped this movie would be, you know, just based on the people that were in it and everything else. And it just didn't, for me, it just didn't get there.
Right.
So the other thing that I was having a little bit of a hard time trying to understand was the whole Wizard of Oz imagery in this, and, you know, things, and it kept getting more intense as it went on. Like, they kept mentioning Wizard of Oz a little bit here and there towards the beginning of the movie. And then as you get further in, you see like the mother is looking through a crystal ball, and she can see them. And it's very much like the Wizard of Oz with the witch. And then later on, there's a scene where Lula is like, she wants to be rescued from the situation she's in. So she's tapping her red high-heeled shoes together like it's ruby slippers. And then the part that just it just decided it was full on. Well, you know what? It's the end of the movie. Let's just go with it. Is when he is confronted by that street gang, and he calls them a not very nice name, and they then proceed to beat him into the ground. And as he's laying there in the street, he looks up, and Glenda, the Good Witch of the North, comes floating down out of the sky and tells him that if he loves something, he shouldn't let it go, that he needs to go back to Lula, and that she loves him too. And then he jumps up and he thanks the gang for beating him and tells them he's really learned a lesson. And then he screams Lula's name and runs off and finds her car in traffic, and they live happily ever after, maybe. All right. Well, I was going to mention really fast, and then we can get on into our 3 questions. Is I tried to look up. I was like, oh, just give me an idea of who else is similar in style to David Lynch. You know, who is it that's making movies now that's similar in style? And so I found a few different people, and I looked up to see, like, have I seen many of their movies? And I have, and I like their movies a lot better. So, you know, maybe that says something about if they learned from him, but you know, maybe I just like their style a whole lot better. So I did look up a few of them, and some of them are, let's see, there was David Robert Mitchell is considered to be a similar, you know, being influenced by David Lynch. And he did a couple of different, the only one of his I think that I've seen is It Follows, which is a horror movie. But I actually really liked it. Thought it was a really well done horror movie, had a very different take on it. And these teenagers are being followed by an entity that will never stop following them. There is one particular thing that they can do to get the entity to stop following them, but once they do this, it kind of passes the curse on to someone else, and you just have to keep passing the curse on. And ultimately you're just kind of, you're not getting rid of this thing. You're just passing it to the next person and then hoping that it never comes back for you at some point. So that was kind of a fun movie. I did like that one. Jonathan Glazer was another one. And let's see, I was looking real fast what he did. He did a movie called Under the Skin, which has some kind of weird imagery to it and kind of weird music and other stuff, but I still really enjoyed it. Basically in that movie, Scarlett Johansson is an alien that has landed, I think, in Scotland, and she is kind of, for lack of a better term, she is kidnapping people and feeding on them and stealing their skin.
Okay.
And so she's wearing someone else's skin. That's why she looks like Scarlett Johansson. But, she's this kind of inky black alien underneath. And throughout the whole movie, she's just kind of like seducing men and bringing them, back to her spaceship and like stealing the life out of them.
Okay, good.
So
good.
It was weird. It was quirky, but it was actually kind of a fun movie. Another director that was similar is Richard Kelly, and he directed the movie Donnie Darko. Did you ever see that one?
No, but I've heard of it.
Yeah. That one was good too. I mean, it's definitely got some absurd stuff, but I feel like in all of these movies I've listed so far, I cared about the characters. And I think that's where some of this was missing. The last one I found on this list here was Darren Aronofsky, and he's done several movies that I either have a problem with or some of them I kind of enjoyed.
Mm-hmm.
Some of those that were kind of like the shocking for the sake of being shocking were things like Requiem for a Dream. He did that one. He did Noah, so I really don't like that one. And that doesn't really help that case. But so there's some stuff here or there, but it seems like some of these people that were influenced by David Lynch, I'm like, I like their movies. So right. Maybe it's just maybe it needs to be, and I don't want to call when somebody's influenced by somebody else. I was about to say maybe it's just a watered down version of his stuff, and I don't want to say that about those directors, because just because you're influenced by somebody doesn't mean it's a watered down version of it. But I think I just don't like his take on his own style.
Right.
If there's other people that are influenced by it, whatever they bring to it that's different, I just feel like for me, they did it better.
Yeah. No, I agree. I agree. And I think we've hit the nail on the head, at least for, what I struggle with. And I know you mentioned it too. And it's just, I could tolerate the style and there not being whiz-bang action and the good guys winning. I can tolerate all that stuff. Mm-hmm. But just let me care about the characters.
Right.
I just don't even care.
Right. Right. Well, should we jump into 3 questions? Do you care about 3 questions?
I care about 3 questions.
I care.
I care.
I feel like we're just going to quote Star Wars stuff all night.
I would like to talk about Star Wars.
Guys, there's nothing wrong with that. All right, 3 questions.
He asks each traveler 5 questions. 3 questions. 3 questions.
It's impossible to answer.
Impossible because you don't know the answer.
Nobody could answer that question.
I want to ask you a bunch of questions. I want to have them answered immediately.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard. At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought. Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it. I award you no points, and may God have mercy on your soul.
All right, 3 questions. Question number 1. If you were going to hire a bounty hunter or tracker to catch someone, which fictional or non-fictional bounty hunter would you hire? And I will let us go first, but we also did have several people chimed in from the Twitter sphere, and we can throw those in there too. But what do you got, Pat?
I'll start with the man with the man with no name from For a Few Dollars More.
There you go.
I think, well, he was the man with no name, but I think they referred to him as Manco, or they had some nickname for him. But Clint Eastwood character in the Man with No Name, or in the For a Few Dollars More.
So mine, I decided to go with Leonard Smalls from Raising Arizona.
Okay.
So the big dirty looking guy on the motorcycle that was like a fire shooting out all over the place, and the one that was trying to track down the baby.
Right.
So I would go with that one. There's plenty of other obvious choices like The Mandalorian or somebody like that, but I was like, let's even stick with like a Nicolas Cage theme. Let's go with Raising Arizona. So I'm going to pick Leonard Smalls from Raising Arizona.
All right, man. Well played.
So off the Twitters, we had Jason Colvin at jcolvin24. He said there's only one correct answer here, and it's The Mandalorian. And then he proceeded to tweet me 3 more times and say, okay, well, maybe also Boba Fett. Okay, maybe also IG-11. Okay, maybe also Bosk. So basically listed pretty much every bounty hunter from Star Wars.
Right.
He did specifically, though, tweet later on and say everybody but Forlom and Zuckuss. So not those 2 guys. At Tristan Martin from Twitter also said Reno Reigns from Renegade.
Oh, dang. Well played. Well played.
I figured you'd like that one.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Have you still been watching that on Tubi?
Oh, you have no idea.
Have you?
You have no idea. In fact, I just want to say a personal triumph of mine was I was telling my dad, because my dad is looking for different shows to check. I'm like, Dad, there's this thing called Tubi TV. You got to check it out. And the other day he's like, hey, you're not going to believe it. I downloaded the app onto the TV. Wow, there's a lot of fun stuff on there. And I'm like, yeah, Dad, I know. So yeah. I most certainly, because anytime you just need to, like, I don't want to say not think, but just not think and just enjoy. The Renegade is the perfect show. So you said Tristan said that one?
Yeah.
Well, dude, that's awesome. Well played.
Yeah. All right. Question number 2. Who is the most intense movie mother?
Most intense movie mother.
So of a mother in a movie, who would be the most intense? Oh, and I'm sorry. Let me back up for a second. There was another. This kind of came in just as we were getting ready to record. I happened to spot this on here. There is another Twitter account that sometimes we'd interact with, and actually they have sent me some t-shirts from their business at Movie Tees.
Okay.
So it's at MOVITEES. They also responded to a couple of these, and I completely forgot to include theirs here when I wrote down the some of the answers for what other people had shared to our questions here. So they had mentioned that, let me pull theirs up real quick. They had mentioned for someone to track them down would be Jack Walsh from Midnight Run.
Okay. So
that was a good one.
Good one. Good choice.
So let's see. Back to our second question here. So most intense movie mother. So I'll do the Twitters first. At jcolvin24 said the mom from Home Alone.
Okay.
She very intense in a very panicked way. James D. Graves at James D. Graves said the evil stepmother from Cinderella.
Yeah.
There you go. At Movie Tees said the mom from Throw Mama from the Train. And let's see. And at Soonerborn 1972 said Joan Crawford from the movie Mommy Dearest.
All right.
I said Piper Laurie as Margaret White in the movie Carrie, like the old horror movie Carrie with Sissy Spacek in it. Have you ever seen that one?
No, but I know of it, and I think I've seen parts of it.
She's super intense. I said that whole scene too, where she just keeps repeating, "They're all gonna laugh at you," like that when she's repeating that over and over again, and just it's just creepy.
Yeah, I don't know if I can top that list. Like I don't think I really have anything that can better what was already said.
Okay. No mothers to just make you think, yikes.
Yeah, and that was kind of one of the ones, like, you jumped into the Twitter spheres for the answers, and that was kind of like, in preparing for the 3 questions, I was like, man, I'm gonna have the other guys go first just because I need my memory jog. Like, I can't really think of anything. Yeah, I got nothing else to add. If I think of something, I'll throw it in. But
okay, all right.
Yeah,
I did when the at movie tease had sent. They actually put a GIF of the mom from Throw Mama from the Train, and it was a part of the movie where she goes, "Owen doesn't have a friend." You know that line in the movie where she kind of like gets up in the person's face and says, "Owen doesn't have, like, I'm Owen's friend. Owen doesn't have a friend." And I looked at that and I was like, that is why that scene in Lord of the Rings: The Two Towers is so familiar. When Gollum says, "Nobody likes you. You don't have any friends." She and Gollum look almost exactly the same.
It's awesome.
Almost exactly the same. That's why that scene was so familiar when I saw it for the first time.
Awesome.
I think I tweeted back to them. I said, "Yeah, that comes from that black comedy movie, Throw Gollum from the Precipice."
Nice.
All right. So question number 3: several times during early screenings of the movie, go figure, several people walked out. Have you ever walked out of a movie without finishing it?
No, I've finished it all, but there have been movies that have made me come very, very, very close.
Okay. Not including this one. What movies would those have been?
Well, I got really angry with Harry Potter 4 and the Goblet of Fire.
Oh, I remember you telling me about that.
But I mean, I think it's a good movie. It wasn't the book, and there was some stuff that I really enjoyed in the book that they left within the first 4 to 5 minutes of that book. Well, the first 4 to 5 minutes of the book, the equivalent of, what was covered in the first 4 to 5 minutes of the movie, they had left out some stuff from the book, and I was like, I flew into a rage, stood up and told Tammy we're leaving the theater, to which she promptly glared at me and said, "Sit down." And I'm like, "Yes, dear," and sat down and calmed down. And I guess it's an okay movie, but I got angry about that. So that's kind of my silly one. The only other one that I was like, dude, what am I watching? Let's leave, was the movie Ultraviolet.
Okay.
That
was a vampire one, wasn't it?
That's the vampire one, but
was that Kate Beckinsale?
Yeah, I think. Well, no, she was in.
No.
Well, I don't think so. I thought, wasn't she in Underworld or? Oh,
that's probably what I'm thinking about.
Yeah, this one was different, and it was just a weird movie. Like it. I don't think I'm not intelligent enough to understand it. I just think it was not very clear. Like, what are they fighting? What's the motive? It was kind of a hodgepodge. And that.
Oh, okay. It's Mila Jovovich.
Yes.
Okay.
And I was just kind of like, what is going on? Like, should we just head out? And Tammy kind of gave me that, well, if you really want to. And I was like, well, maybe it'll get better. And then I think I just went to sleep.
Yeah.
And Tammy woke me up at the end, and then that was that. So maybe it's an outstandingly good movie, and I just don't get it. But yeah, I did not enjoy that movie.
Okay. Fair enough. I don't think I've ever seen that one, but
yeah, it is.
All right. So my answer for this one, we have, as far as I can remember, now there have been a few movies that we've thought, oh man, I kind of wish we would have walked out of that one. One of them being the aforementioned Noah. I did not like that movie at all. Oh man. Because sometimes I'll share the 3 questions with the kids over dinner if I know that we're going to be recording on the particular night. I'll be like, hey guys, I've got some questions for you. Let's see if you can answer some of them for me. And this one, obviously, they haven't seen enough movies and they're kids, so going to a movie is just fun. They don't walk out of anything. But I mentioned that, and I mentioned that I said, yeah, Noah, and the kids were like, wait a minute, they made a movie about Noah, and you wanted to walk out of it?
Yeah.
I was like, well, because yes. Because Noah ends up fighting rock monsters, and he like tries to kill one of his own children, and they're just staring at me like, wait, what?
And
I said, yes, The bewildered look on your face is the same that Dad had when he was sitting in the theater watching this steaming pile of garbage. So, did not walk out of that one, though my wife and I both agreed we probably should have. The two that I can remember, now, I think this is not one of the two. I think that either we walked out or we felt like we should have walked out of, it was either the second or the third Pirates of the Caribbean movie.
Right.
And I don't remember which one it was, but it was just at some point in one of those movies, we were just kind of like, you know what? This is just bad.
Right.
It's just not even like, there's so many other better things we could have spent our $15 on that. No. But the two that I know for a fact we walked out of and we asked for our money back were, there's a Viggo Mortensen movie called A History of Violence.
Okay.
Walked out of that one. And there was a particular scene in that movie that was kind of the breaking point. And as soon as that happened, we were like, nope, we're out of here. We're gone. Not sitting through this one anymore. And then the other one was The Lady Killers.
Okay.
And The Lady Killers was a remake of a movie that Sir Alec Guinness had actually played, I think, the leading role in. And this one was done by Tom Hanks and directed by the Coen brothers, who have done like Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? And, a whole bunch of those movies. And so that was supposed to be like a great combination. We're like, this is going to be a great movie. It was an awful movie. It was just horrible. So those are the times I can think of that we actually walked out of the movie and then asked for our money back for our ticket. But those two.
Wow. Now, how do they do with giving you money back for your tickets?
You know what? It was, I feel like one of the times maybe we just turned right back around and we're like, well, let's see what the next movie is at a different theater. We'll give you this money back, but we're not going to watch this movie anymore. It tends to be, and I used to work in a movie theater. If somebody leaves the theater, it's kind of a judgment call. If the movie is more than halfway over, then as an employee or a manager, a manager has to okay it. But if the movie is more than halfway over, then it's kind of up to the manager to decide if you're going to give the person their money back.
Okay.
And part of that is movie theaters, for the most part, they make their money on their concessions anyway.
Okay.
So, if you came and you had some popcorn and you had a drink and you enjoyed part of the movie, but then you wanted your $10 back or whatever, it really happens so few and far between. Most people don't even think that they could ask for their money back leaving a movie. But I think most times the manager at the movie theater is just going to be like, I want these people to come back to my theater. So if they weren't happy, sure, I'll give them their $10 back. And, no big deal. They probably bought $50 worth of popcorn anyway. So, yeah, my uncle did that one time too. I feel like he took his kids to a movie and that even the kids thought the movie was awful. And so they walked out and got their money back.
Yeah. I just wonder how that all goes.
Yeah. Yeah. It didn't, I worked in a movie theater for probably a year and a half, maybe almost 2 years. And I don't recall anybody ever asking for their money back during that stretch of time. So it doesn't happen very often.
Got it.
Now, granted, that was the same stretch of time that the Lord of the Rings movies were coming out, and you had Revenge of the Sith, and you had The Last Samurai, and all kinds of really good stuff. So there's no reason to ask for your money back with those movies.
No. You should be making a donation.
Right. On Twitter, at jcolvin24 said Last Action Hero, though he admits that he may have just been in a bad mood and he needs to give that one another try.
Okay.
And at James D. Graves said Showgirls and Jaws 3D.
Okay, I can see all.
I'm sorry, no, Jaws 3 in 3D.
Okay.
So.
I can see all that.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. I think his exact comment, or may have been Jason's reply to his comment, was he said something like, I'll agree with you on the Showgirls one. Somehow that movie made naked women boring.
Yeah, I've heard that too.
Like, okay. I haven't seen that one, have no desire to see it, but I will take their word for it.
Right.
All right. Well, I don't think there's really too much else we feel like we need to say about Wild at Heart. We're certainly not wild about it.
No, we certainly aren't, but I think we gave it a pretty fair due, and I think we've got to the root cause of, at least I feel like I can put my finger on where it failed for me.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. Different movie.
Yeah. I was going to I was going to look ahead really fast just to kind of see, in the years going forward, now that we've hit 1990, in the years going forward, what other movies are we going to have that are David Lynch movies? And, Twin Peaks was a TV series that came out around about this time, and I know it's ridiculously popular at the time, and I believe they're even bringing it back right now if they haven't already. They did. I was looking back on here real quick. They brought it back in 2017. Looks like it had 18 episodes. So, and I know that there have been other Twin Peaks, they've kind of brought it back here and there a few different times, but it seems like in the last few years, he's really mostly done short films, like just real short stuff. A few things here and there, but yeah. So I don't know how much more David Lynch we're going to get until we get to maybe like late 90s, early 2000s. So we'll see. We'll see where it goes. All right. Well, in the meantime, thanks for being here with me, Pat.
Well, thanks, John. It was fun. It was fun talking movies, and even the ones we don't like, it was fun trying to wrap our heads around it.
Oh yeah, always. All right. Well, I think coming up soon, let me take a look real fast at our upcoming movies here. We got coming up real soon. Mermaids is going to finish out the Love is in the Air month for us. And then in March, we got Planes and Automobiles with Air America, Memphis Belle, Days of Thunder, and Cadillac Man. And then in April, if you want to get really far ahead, we've got Dances with Wolves, The Hunt for Red October, Navy SEALs, and Rocky V. So that's what we got coming out soon. Next week, we'll be back here with Mermaids. So be excellent to each other. Go watch some good movies, and we'll see you back here next week for Mermaids.